All right, let's talk about it. This is the story of how the world just completely, totally lost its mind.
But look, if we did have a time machine sponsor, you can bet we'd be sending a few people back to the early 1900s with some, let's just say, very strongly worded advice.
I mean, take a guy like Winston Churchill, right? We all know him as the bulldog of Britain, but before all that, he was a painter. He was into butterflies, a butterfly nerd, really. And get this, he even dabbled in alien conspiracy theories. So yeah, the guy had hobbies. But you know what class he really could have used? How not to start a world war. And spoiler alert, pretty much everyone we're going to talk about today, they fail that class, big time.
So, where does this whole mess begin? Well, our story kicks off with a couple of guys who are having a, let's call it a major career crisis. And their solution? Oh, you know, just to channel all that angst into becoming dictators.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about Benito Mussolini. His early resume is just, it's wild. Seriously, he starts out dodging the draft. Then he dives headfirst into being a radical socialist. He gets arrested, not once, but repeatedly. Then he's out there writing against a war in Libya. And then, in just a spectacular 180, he becomes super pro-war for World War I. His socialist friends were so confused, they were just like, all right, you're out. So, what do you do when you've basically been kicked out of your own ideology? Well, if you're Mussolini, you just invent a new one.
And just like that, fascism was born. And what is it, really? Well, think of it as this powerful mix of super intense nationalism, that whole make Italy great again vibe, plus a huge dose of nostalgia for a glorious past, all wrapped up in this core belief that one strong leader can fix everything. And you have to remember, in a time of total chaos, that promise of order and national pride, that's a really, really appealing message. And yeah, Italy was totally ready for a message like that. I mean, think about it. They were technically on the winning side of World War I, but they felt like they got completely ripped off in the peace deals. Their economy was in the toilet, the government was a total mess, and then in walks Mussolini, basically shouting from the rooftops, "I alone can fix this." And before you know it, boom, Europe has its first fascist dictator.
Meanwhile, over in Germany, you've got this similar kind of anger brewing, but for the exact opposite reason. They didn't just lose the war, they were absolutely crushed by the peace treaty that followed. The Treaty of Versailles, I mean, it took their land, it took their money, it gutted their military, and it just stripped them of all their national pride. These terms you see here, they created this deep, simmering rage that was just waiting for a match.
And that match, that spark, was of course Adolf Hitler. And his rise to power is just, it's genuinely shocking when you lay it out. In 1923, this guy is a failed revolutionary, sitting in a jail cell, scribbling down what's basically a political rage diary. Just 10 years later, 10 years, he is the leader of Germany. It was an unbelievably fast climb, and it was fueled entirely by that national anger and total economic despair.
So, okay, we've got two dictators in power in Europe. It was really only a matter of time before they started, connecting with each other. You can almost think of it as a really, really destructive social network.
All right, so let's meet the squad, shall we? You've got Hitler in Germany, whose main hobby is basically breaking treaties. Then there's Mussolini in Italy, daydreaming about a new Roman Empire. And over in Japan, you have the military leadership who are busy collecting islands like their Pokemon cards. So what brought this fun bunch together? Well, they all shared a major allergy to democracy and this incredibly dangerous belief that they were racially superior to everyone else.
Now, Japan's story is a little different. They've been isolated for centuries, right? Then, Western powers basically kicked the door down and forced them open. Japan felt like they got a really raw deal. So what was their response? A mind-blowingly fast industrial revolution and a cold, hard decision to build their own empire by taking over their neighbors. The logic was pretty brutal. If you can't beat them, become them.
Okay, so with all these threats bubbling up, how did the rest of the world react? Well, this next part is basically a masterclass in what not to do. Let's call it a game of appeasement bingo.
So Hitler starts to test the waters. He starts breaking the rules of the Treaty of Versailles, but like one by one. He rebuilds the army? Check. He secretly creates an air force? Check. He marches troops into the Rhineland, a totally forbidden zone? Check. And each time he does this, the Allies just kind of watched. And of course, this lack of action just made him bolder and bolder. So next, he annexes Austria without a single shot fired, and then he turns his attention to Czechoslovakia. And this all leads to the now infamous Munich Conference. The British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, he flies in, and his whole goal is to avoid war at all costs. The policy they came up with was called appeasement, which is really just a fancy word for giving the schoolyard bully what he wants and just praying he'll finally leave you alone. So what did they give him? A huge chunk of Czechoslovakia.
So did it work? No, not even a little bit. I mean, almost immediately after promising, okay, I'm done, Hitler just went ahead and invaded the rest of the country. Appeasement was a complete and utter catastrophe. It was the ultimate proof that you just can't negotiate with someone who sees negotiation itself as a sign of weakness. So, after this whole string of failures and terrible miscalculations, we finally get to the moment where the dam just breaks. This is it. This is the part where the world goes from a low-grade fever to a full-blown, world-ending catastrophe.
Hitler's next target is Poland, but he's smart enough to know he doesn't want to fight a war on two fronts. So he does something truly unthinkable. He makes a deal with his #1 ideological enemy, Joseph Stalin. The Nazi-Soviet pact was just this stunningly cynical agreement to literally carve up Poland between them. And on September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded. That was it. The world was officially at war.
But here's the weird thing. The war started in this bizarrely quiet way. Like everyone expected instant, massive bombing raids, total chaos. But instead, Britain and France declare war, and then they just kind of sat there. For months, the most aggressive thing they did was drop a bunch of propaganda leaflets over Germany. It got nicknamed the Phony War. It was this incredibly eerie calm before a storm you couldn't even imagine.
Well, that phony war came to a very abrupt end in the spring of 1940. Germany unleashed this devastating new tactic called Blitzkrieg, lightning war. And forget everything you know about trench warfare. This was fast-moving tanks and screaming dive bombers, all in one coordinated punch, designed to just shatter enemy lines and create total chaos. And it was brutally effective. France, which was supposed to have one of the strongest armies in the world, completely collapsed in just 6 weeks.
With France collapsing, the British and what was left of the French armies were trapped on the coast at a place called Dunkirk. And what happened next was this incredible moment that was somehow both a heroic miracle and a sign of total crushing defeat. A whole fleet of civilian boats, we're talking fishing boats, yachts, little ferries, they sailed across the English Channel to rescue over 300,000 soldiers right off the beaches. So France is gone. Britain is now standing completely alone. Hitler launches this massive air campaign to destroy Britain's Royal Air Force, the RAF. And at first, by targeting their air bases, he was winning. But then, he made a huge, fatal mistake. After a small British raid on Berlin, he got so enraged that he completely switched tactics. He stopped bombing the strategic airfields and started bombing London instead. And that emotional decision, it was a strategic disaster. It gave the RAF just enough breathing room to repair and regroup. And that's what ultimately allowed them to win the Battle of Britain and stop a German invasion.
So, let's just take a breath and recap where we are by the end of 1940. Almost all of Europe is controlled by dictators. Britain is fighting for its very survival. The world has just descended into absolute chaos. It was a giant, horrific mess, all started by a handful of leaders who just could not stand the idea of peace.
And that's really the sobering takeaway from all this, isn't it? It's just a stark reminder of how fragile peace really is, and how the ambitions of just a few people can spiral into a tragedy that engulfs the entire globe. So, the next time you're stressing out because your group project is going badly, just remember, at least yours didn't start World War II.